Tottenham Hotspur are currently in freefall. They are supposed to be one of the top 6 sides, as they say, in the Premier League, but they are currently 15th in the table, and more importantly, just 8 points off relegation. Today, we are asking the question, why is this top football club failing right now? Is there any ways they can turn it around? And is the manager, is the owner to blame? Let's kick things off. Jamie, let's be fair. Let's be fair to Ange to kickstart things. He has been very dismissive in many interviews. We've seen the clips of him sort of calling out fans that are, I guess, abusing him or the team. So there's a lot of toxicity around the club right now. But does he have a genuine gripe? And does he have a genuine excuse for them to be 15th in the table? Because injuries are the big one.
Well, yeah, when you look at the injuries, there are a lot of injuries. And mainly it's in that defence. Because if you look at the injuries in this defence, Vicario has been out since November after the City game. So that was their best result this season. And now that keeper was out, they've had Udogie out since end of December. So really, I can't give that as a full excuse because that's 1 month out. I know he's had a few other injuries, but he's still out now. You've got Romero, who's been out since early December. Van der Ven has missed a total of 18 games this season. And now for the last game, you had Spence out as well. So it just seems to be a constant, one player might be coming back, but another one gets injured. And to be honest, I am seeing it with City as well. And it's just sort of like the defence being so disjointed. How are you meant to keep clean sheets in games when you don't even know what four's playing? And also, out of the 4 that Spurs have been playing, they've been putting in Gray into the defence when he's not a defender. He's meant to be a young sort of guy coming in. He's meant to learn these sort of games, but he's being thrown in at the deep end, in centre back, and it's unfortunately it's just not paying off for them. And there's too many injuries, so it is a big factor. It's why Spurs aren't, like last season, they finished 5th. It's why Spurs aren't up challenging for the top 4 European places at least. But 15th is that acceptable? That is probably the biggest problem there. Injuries are one thing and that can knock you down. But to be 15th, where you're technically in a relegation battle, I know you said 8 points, that is still quite a bit. But you're technically in a relegation battle. And it's not like it's early on in the season. We're at the end of January. That's a massive, massive problem.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is like it can't be an excuse to be 15th. I think you have to account for injuries. Like you have to say that's a fair point. Reece, what's your take on this? Do you think injuries are the reason?
I would say they're probably the main driving reason. If you look at their injury list at the moment, that is a starting 11. That is quite damning. Vicario, Spence, Romero, Van der Ven, Udogie, Basuma, Maddison. You've got Johnson, Solanke, Werner. That's a starting 11, and that's a good starting 11. And it's horrible because they're all out for long term. Well, most of them are out quite long term during key games. They seem to be picking up the same sorts of injuries as well. Van der Ven, for example, seems to get one hamstring injury after the other, and it is a big issue. And it does make you think what's causing that. That's when you then have to look and say, is it due to the training they take for Ange's style of play, or are those players always carried injuries? To my knowledge, I don't really recall injuries on this scale like this. So this is where then, you have to look at the training. You have to look at the, if they're running into the ground all the time, is that really the right way to do it? If we remember correctly, Van der Ven and Romero were both injured at the same time. They started against, I think it was Liverpool, if not Chelsea. Do correct me if I'm wrong. And they both got injured. That's poor. So then that's when the manager has to take some of the responsibility and the blame there. And also, it's not just the injury issues. There's no depth in that side. You drop Solanke, who'd you put there? Do you know what I mean? Yes, Mikey Moore is a very good player. Will Lancashire is a very good player. But they're not ready to start yet. they should be the ones still coming off the bench and whoever the backup striker is. So it's a mixture of things. It's a cycle of things where everyone has to take an individual responsibility.
Yeah, and I guess let's start with it. We'll start with why Ange has a genuine excuse before we get into absolutely ripping him. But let's talk about their squad, because you touched on it there, Reece. Squad depth is the other genuine gripe, or I guess genuine excuse that you could put in as to why Spurs are struggling so badly. Is the squad reason valid? Because my initial thoughts on this are that it is kind of fair, but if you look at the teams around them, their squad is not a relegation squad. So for me, I see it as, regardless of all the excuses, Ange is still underperforming.
Yeah, I would agree on that, because I look at their game against Leicester on Sunday and they should still be beating Leicester. There are players in there who have the quality, and I would say to Ange, like, why aren't those players delivering quality? They have to look at themselves. But they've dropped 21 points from leading positions in the league this season. That's ridiculous. I think they've won only 9 games in 9 months. Do you know what I mean? That's insane. So that, and that, if that factors in from last season, you have to is it because the tactics have been found out? As soon as Ange said, I'm not going to change, fair enough, stick to your principles. But if you know a manager's style in and out, it's probably quite easy to tactically go against that. You'll go for, they're weak at set pieces, so you're going to target set pieces, for example. It's pretty naive to think that. I do like Ange, I really, really do, and I thought he was a good fit for Spurs at the time. But he has to be more tactically flexible, I think.
Yeah, and Jamie, for you, like we touched the squad, but then when you have a look at their signings they've made, it's not like, and naturally there's a lot of pressure on Levy right now. There has been for a while. They have signed players. They needed a striker. They addressed it. They signed Solanke for what, 65 million. So what is going wrong? Because it's not like they've completely signed no one.
No, actually, I was looking at the signings that Ange has made. He's signed 16 players for just under 400 million that's 2 seasons now. So it's not like he's not spent any money. This is euros, by the way. He's not spent any money. Like you said, he's bought Solanke, but I do want to put a caveat, because Harry Kane was carrying this team for a long while, and I think the squad was actually poorer under Kane, and he was digging them out. And so bringing in Solanke, look, Solanke is a good Premier League striker, but he's not up to Kane's level. So you are going to see a drop-off from Spurs in that aspect. Son is now sort of on the decline. It's not like he's a terrible player. It's just he's on the decline. So you are weakening your 2 best players. One has gone and one is on the decline. But if you are looking at the transfers they've brought in, when you spend that much amount of money, I would still expect to see a quality squad around it. And I think Reece touched on the point where you're mentioning like 4 or 5 youngsters, and they're having to play too much for what they probably should be now. And when you're looking at, you've got Gray was 41 million, Odebert was 30, you had Johnson at 55, Maddison at 40, 45, 46, Porra at 40, Van der Ven 40. It's not like they're not spending any money. I do agree there are problems with Levy. Like, let's be honest, he's the guy who 2 days before their League Cup final sacked Mourinho. And Mourinho at that time, I think, hadn't lost the final, or had lost maybe one final before that. So to have someone like that as your chairman making footballing decisions like that, he deserves a lot of criticism. And the banner that Spurs fans had up was, I think it was 24 years, 16 managers, 1 trophy. To be a big 6 side, that is not good enough. Because when you put it into contrast, Leicester have won more in recent years over that, and Leicester wouldn't have definitely not spent as much as Tottenham. Now, Leicester have got relegated, But I'd argue I'd rather have that journey than what Spurs' journey has been.
100%. I think their fans would, all their fans would agree. I think all their fans would agree with that. Like, and I know everyone hates this top six term anyway. Spurs right now should no longer be classified as a top six team. You know, that we know that's not going to change, but I think they're just not there. And what's crazy is they've got this supposedly rich owner, you know, £1 billion stadium, and like they're 15th in the table. Like, it's just not good enough. And I think whichever way you spin it, whether it's injuries, lack of spend, but as we said, there has been spend. I do think there is something fundamentally wrong. And it seems to be, you know, a mentality issue as well. We all joke and say Spursy this, Spursy that. Reece, you touched it with the stats. It proves they are bottling this. And you can blame the manager, I guess, yes. But there is a reason that Conte, Mourinho, Nuno, who's now flying, there's a reason these managers didn't succeed at this football club. And it has to be a little bit deeper rooted. So it doesn't make sense.
I mean, I think the criticism on Levy is harsh. I think Levy would probably admit that, you know, he would like to win more. I have no doubt about that in my mind. He'd like to win more. He has pumped the money in, you know, even during the mid 2000s, you know, when they were signing a lot of players and still not breaking that top four barrier. He has every right to be disappointed. It does make you think, is there a culture and is there a fan expectation that impacts this mentality? Under Poch, it looked like they got it right. They had an amazing squad. You know, most of them made up the England team. Even if a player was injured, it looked like they were able to still do just fine. And a lot of that's probably due to Pochettino's man management and his tactical awareness, which gives them the credit there. And they overachieved. And then I think slowly that team has faded out and they've not been replaced, or there's not been a plan in place to reconstruct. Because you'd like to think that after, you know, it would have worked that way. Yeah, again, yes, they should have won more trophies. This club isn't just top six side. They're a founding father of the Premier League. They were one of the 5 clubs that pushed for the Premier League to be founded. You know, they're the only team on non-league team to have won an FA Cup, first team to do the double. So they're not a small fry, but I just think that a lot of it's been unfortunate. But I also think there's been that pressure. I see similarities to West Ham in some ways, of that expectation probably gazumps what the reality is sometimes. But this is a club with big potential. As I've mentioned, you know, he's looking to sell Daniel Levy. I have no doubt about that. And he's looking to get that Middle East investment. Things will change, you know, and there's no point probably investing now if you're gonna at least open up the doors in the summer.
But Reece, you're sort of saying that it's harsh, the sort of criticism on Levy. But if you're there for like I said, 24 years, and you've won 1 trophy, and you are a big club. Spurs are a big club, and it's 1 trophy. You've got to think to yourself, is he doing something wrong? Because he's the consistent factor in this period. And like Jordan mentioned, Conte, Mourinho, they win a lot of trophies between them two. It doesn't have to be the league. It should be a League Cup, an FA Cup. Like, there's no divine right that you win trophies. So I do understand that you can't just say Spurs should have won a trophy by divine right. You don't get that. You have to earn it. But even the Pochettino era, he won 0 trophies. And it's like that. Okay, I understand Spurs fans were happy with the sort of Pochettino era because he played good football and was actually competing with big sides. Now, and he got him to a Champions League final. It still to me seems like you can't have an owner there for 20 plus years for a side as big as Tottenham and settle for one sort of trophy. And you have to look. I think if you're Levy, you have to go, it's probably me.
I don't think Levy is settling for 1 trophy. You know, when he took over, Spurs were in the toilet financially, so he has stabilised, and I do think he does
off the pitch. He's done phenomenal. Like, the stadium is a brilliant stadium, and there's a lot of things going into that to build Tottenham up for the future. So it's not like he's done an awful job all round. But at the end of the day, we're football fans. 99% of the time, we care about what's on the pitch.
No, of course, and I think he wants, like I said, he wants to win trophies. I think he puts the guardianship or the custodianship of the club first. Hence why I think probably Conte and Mourinho didn't work out. I think if you look at, Inter Milan, they're financially a mess, especially under Conte. They had to sell players. That's what the reason he left. But he demanded those players in. And I think Mourinho can have that similarity too. That's not a comment on them. It's just how it is. So maybe that's why I think, the investment in the summer that's expected is going to be a big help and it's going to change things. But again, it's not all his fault. I think it started with the loss of Sol Campbell all them years ago, and it looks like it's trickled through now. But there is only so much he can do. If you look at sometimes those players on the pitch when they're chucking it away when they shouldn't, or when a manager is resting players in a League Cup quarter-final, for example, when he has a good opportunity to go through to the next round, I would be furious if I was Daniel Levy. But what would you do that for?
But that's got to come from above. Levy's got to be the one saying, like, go and win me a Carabao Cup. Like, go and win me the FA Cup.
Yeah, but he doesn't pick a team. And also, like I said, the owners never come into question when your team are winning, right?
Yeah.
Levy was never under criticism when Pochettino was winning. The Cronkies are currently not being mentioned once. They only become a problem when your team's not doing well. And that's a big issue that fans have, I think. Sometimes you just need to wake up.
Yeah. I mean, look, we've cut, I guess, Ange some slack here in terms of injuries and maybe a lack of signings or pressure on Levy. But let's talk about some of the obvious criticisms, because we can't sit here with a straight face and say Ange is perfect and he's been so harshly done by. Because at the minute, he's struggling. And not only can he not deal with things on the pitch, but he can't deal with things off the pitch. He's calling out fans. He's getting frustrated with fans. He is being, I don't even know the word, but he's being abrupt. He's being rude in interviews. With an interviewer asking him what's going on, and he just can't seem to answer the basic questions. If your team's losing, you're in 15th in the table, and you lose it, like, you're obviously going to get asked these questions. So I'll kick things off, and I think it's the obvious one with Ange. I think tactically, and we've said it for a while, tactically, he is very, very naive. And it was nice at the start when Spurs went on that great run and they were in the title race, obviously, as we called it. That was nice. And it's cool, we're playing this great style of football. But after 2 months and everyone figures out how you play, it's not so nice anymore. And in the Premier League era, that simple old school tactics, when you don't have a plan B, isn't going to cut it. Like, look at the managers we're seeing have success now. Nuno, Iriola, Marco Silva. These are tactical managers who don't have a plan A. They have a plan A, B, C, and D. And I think Ange has to take a bit of the responsibility here, because he doesn't have a plan B. And you need a plan B when you've got injuries and you've got players playing out of position. So I think for me, a lot of this position, 15th, does sit on Ange, irrespective of all the excuses. What do you guys think on this?
It's a difficult one, because it's sort of like, I see it under Pep. Pep will change his tactics, but it is kind of like the overall way of going about it is similar. And that's even happened during our sort of bad spell this season. So sometimes it can be that your managers are brought in for that reason. So, and it's the thing that sort of got them the job. So why are they going to abandon their sort of like philosophy and ideas? They're like, if my tactics work, that's what I know. That's what I'm training my players to do. Why am I going to just go and change it for what? Also, the sort of argument with the injuries and changing it is, I understand you probably do need to change it in some sort of way to sort of protect Gray, who's playing centre back. But it's also, you can't just abandon it and sort of, go, right, we're going to go completely different tactics, because if you do that and you're not underprepared, you're going to lose. I know they are losing as well. One thing I did want to add to the sort of form of Spurs is they've not won a home game in the last 7 in the Premier League. They have one in the Cups. but 7, and they've played Ipswich, Everton, Leicester. It's sort of, sorry, not all of them are at home. I don't think Everton was at home, but it's sort of, you're playing teams that are around you now in the bottom bit, and they're still not getting the right results. So that's where I think it is worrying, because if you are playing in that certain way and you're not beating them sort of sides.
But sorry, just to jump in, with a Pep point, Pep has earned the right to be arrogant with his tactics because they've worked for City, they've worked at multiple clubs. Ange can talk about trophies, but like, with all due respect, you know, in the Scottish League, you don't need one. You know, for Celtic, you don't need a plan B. Your plan A is just attack and we'll outscore the opposition, and that works in the Scottish League. It doesn't work in the Prem. That's the problem.
No, it probably does need sort of tweaks, but I think it shouldn't be a plan A and plan B shouldn't be totally different, if that makes sense. You've still got to go with what you believe works on the pitch and what you've trained for. And when you're throwing in random players, I think the whole team needs to be familiar with what the tactics are. And if you're tweaking it every sort of 5 minutes because that didn't work out, I think that can cause more confusion. And because we're at the top of the sport, barring the sort of Champions League, you will get punished even more. And I know they are getting punished at the moment, but it can actually get worse. If you're getting absolutely battered by other teams who are your Leicesters, your Ipswiches, Everton, it can get worse. So I do understand why he's sticking by it, but I don't want to. It's like, I understand why he's sticking by it because that's what's him as a manager. But I do get the point of, if it ain't working, why are you not fixing it?
You got it.
But is it just players? It sort of like, if he has the right personnel, he wouldn't be 15th.
I think he wouldn't be 15th, but he'd be down there, like, because defensively they've not been good enough. And I think one positive, going back to a positive, I think I saw a stat earlier. Tottenham have accumulated a higher XG this season than Arsenal, which is pretty wild considering where they are on the table and where Arsenal are on the table. So you could argue that some of his tactics have had attacking benefits and they're not converting and they're not putting the ball in the back of the net. And maybe you can say, oh, well, that's because Solanke's, have been injured a few times. But I think when you're in this position in the league, and we'll get on to whether they could actually be relegated in a second, but you've got to resort to, it's almost like on FIFA, right? You want to be defensible, you go ultra defensive, like stick a few men behind the ball, learn how to defend and then counter-attack. Like, if you're really struggling defensively, that should be the default plan B. And we're just not seeing it in the minute. And it's that arrogance, I think. It is arrogant. You see it with some of his interviews. There is a level of arrogance that Ange has that I don't necessarily think is justified. And I think Spurs fans are cottoning on to that now. And some Spurs fans are kind of seeing through the BS, I think. Reece, tactically, what do you think on this? Is there anything else you've noticed as well?
No, I think the points are valid. I think it's the comments on, not going to change, etc., and that's fine. But you need the players to fit your system, or at least have the depth in your system for it to work. It's not been good because realistically, the win at the Etihad means absolutely nothing because he's lost at home to Leicester and he's lost at home to Ipswich and he lost away to Everton. He's picked up 3 points when he should have got 9, as far as I'm concerned. That's poor. And I think he does, he would look at that and say what's gone on. But we've seen this over recent years where Tottenham have lost those games where they should have gone on to win anyway. I think, tactically, just need a bit more flexibility. There's nothing wrong with admitting that you need to change and maybe play to your strengths, your players you've got. Archie Gray is a fantastic footballer, but he's not a centre-back. He's doing his best at centre-back, and what a bloody good job he's doing. But he's not a centre-back. There needs to be depth. But you can't just keep sacking a manager and doing that. You need to give manager time in order to keep bringing in those players. I am an advocate for Ange. I'm confident he's going to go on to win the League Cup. I'm confident of that. But I said at the time when he was appointed, he's going to be what you call the entertainers, the Kevin Keegan teams, the Dortmund after Klopp teams, all these, these 3-0, 3-0, 4-3s, 2-1s. That's not sustainable long term. So he's got to learn defensive. Bring in some new coaches, maybe bring in some experienced players as well. That's important. Players that have been there and done it.
Yeah, and on that, before we kind of wrap up with the debate of whether they could actually get relegated, I think we need to address the fact that what you just said, Reece, that they are in the Carabao Cup semi-final and they are 1-0 up. So they're potentially 90 minutes away from going to a final, 180 minutes away from winning a trophy. So despite everything we've just said about Ange and everything going wrong, could this be the season that they're going to win a trophy? And Reece, I'm very interested to hear why you're confident they're going to win, because there is zero evidence to suggest that they're going to win that trophy. So maybe let's start back with that, and then we'll get into relegation.
Well, I mentioned it a few rounds. I mentioned it to you two. I was confident they were going to knock Man United out. I was confident they were going to knock Liverpool out over these two legs. I think they've got a good chance in the Europa League when players are back, and they're still in the FA Cup. Let's not forget, they can easily beat Aston Villa. Aston Villa can, are just as capable of imploding. I believe it because I think they're putting all their eggs in one basket. His claim of winning a cup in his second season, although a very bold statement, at the moment is very much on course. And he has a great chance of winning that. Anfield is a tough place to go and they're injury playing, but just they're more than capable of scoring. They've got a goal, so they can score and really pile the pressure on Liverpool. And I think Liverpool have other things to be thinking about right now. So he's more than capable of getting there. If they draw Newcastle in the final, that becomes a problem because Newcastle will also be desperate for a trophy. So that's when your challenge comes into it. I think they're going to do it, and I think their eggs are in that basket to do it. And I think those players are probably going to step up their game for that. So
I sort of agree with Reece on the sort of point of if they get to the final and it's Newcastle, I think they win it. But I don't personally think they're going to go through. I think going to Anfield with a 1-0 lead, I think Liverpool will turn it around because they've got a bit of leeway in the league. So I think they can focus solely on that. They're obviously top of the Champions League group. It's sort of like they won't have to play extra games. So I think they can actually focus a bit on the League Cup because they're so close. If this was sort of, the second round, I'd be going, yeah, I can see Spurs going through because Liverpool going, this isn't worth our time. In a way, we got as sort of, the famous sort of Robbie quote from AFTV was, we've got bigger fish to fry. Obviously, they end up with nothing, but Spurs don't in that way. So, and I think with the Europa League, they're in the qualifying sort of spots, the top 8, so they can definitely focus on that as well. So that is probably the only thing that's keeping him in the job, though.
Yeah.
Because if they were out of the League Cup and they were sort of, I don't know, mid-table where they'd have to play extra games in Europa, I wouldn't see a benefit of keeping him because I think anyone could do that at Spurs. Really,
100%. And I guess the issue is that if he goes out of that Liverpool game and he does lose, because I agree, I think they will lose that game still. Then what? We're still in the Europa League. I don't think that's a big enough thing to keep him in the job. So I do think that it's a bit of an all or nothing game. But look, if they get to the final, fair enough. They've got a big chance either way, and the teams they've put out is worthy of that. I guess the question is, and I kind of assume I know the answer, but Spurs fans, for those of you watching, I assume you'd be happy with a 15th place finish and winning a trophy. But let's talk about the real debate. Could they actually get relegated? Because if they do, look, they're in 15th, right? And they're 8 points off. It's still a big gap, but it is a mathematical possibility. And you look at relegation teams, and what is it? Teams out of form, teams with injuries, and teams that are losing to the other teams around them. And that's what they're doing. They've lost to Everton and Leicester, who are the two teams below them right now. and they lost to Ipswich at home. So could Spurs actually get relegated?
A lot of it actually points to yes, weirdly, because like you look at their games where they've lost the same amount of games to Ipswich in the league. They've recently lost to Leicester, to Everton. They drew with Wolves. It's all teams that they should be fighting. Well, they're teams they should be beating, but they're also teams they're fighting against for this so-called relegation. Personally, because of the injuries, if you're looking back at when people might be returning, it looks like Spence will be back very quickly. Romero's looking back in the next sort of 2 game weeks. So is Van der Ven. So they'll start to get back their squad. And I think they are too good to go down. And the teams below them aren't great. Even though they have beaten Spurs or got points off Spurs, none of them I see getting enough points to claw an 8-point gap. If we're talking about 3, I'd be very concerned if I was a Spurs fan. But 8 points, they'll be fine in the end. I know it's a long-winded way of saying no, but there still is context where things are still not right, and I think other clubs we might be more scared. I think Spurs getting a few players back, they'll be fine in the end. A trophy is more important as well. So I think Spurs fans would want a trophy and finish 15th.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I agree. I think as fun as this conversation is, as embarrassing as their league position is, and it's great entertainment for the rest of us. I don't think there's a realistic chance they get relegated. We know Southampton are down, and they've still got a big enough gap with that 8 points over Ipswich and Wolves. You know, you'd have to. Everton, I think, could finish above them. So I think a realistic finish for Spurs could be 16th, which is still an absolute shambles. But the gap between Leicester, Wolves, and Ipswich, it's unlikely that one Spurs continue at this terrible pace. But the chances of those 3 teams all turning up and going above them, and then no other team slipping in, realistically, it just doesn't make any sense. So yeah, Spurs fans, I think you are safe from the Championship for now. Reece, what about you? Do you agree, or do you actually think it could happen?
No chance of going down. Look, this whole thing of any team can go down is not true. Let's be blunt here. It's the gap's getting wider. The same teams that are coming up, a chance are they're going to go down, unless their club has no money. In the situation of maybe Wolves at the moment. Look, Everton, one of the worst Everton sides you've ever seen, couldn't even go down. That's the difference between Premier League at the moment, established Premier League clubs, and teams coming into the Premier League. So we have to be blunt there. Their goal difference is positive, so they wouldn't even have to worry about going a goal difference if it ever came to that. All their players will come back. They'll get out of it. There's no qualms at all. That the teams below them, with the exception of Everton's sort of revival, are very poor sides. And yeah, like you said, they may have beaten Spurs, but they've beaten Spurs but lose all the other games. So no, they're not going to do it. Spurs are just a couple of wins from thriving, jumping straight back up the table. Let's be honest, and they are better than the rest of the teams above them, maybe with the exception of United at this moment in time. So yeah, but you know, is what it is. There's no chance of them going down.
All right, well, there you have it. We'll end on a positive. Spurs fans, you're not getting relegated, and Reece even thinks you might win a trophy. But as always, make sure you comment below. Let us know your thoughts on both Postecoglou and Levy as well. Do you want him in or do you want him out? But as always, like, comment, and subscribe. You know the drill.